Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and welcome to a special week of reviews on the weekends, which I'm calling Pixar Short Film Weekend. Yes, this weekend I'll be reviewing a couple of Pixar short films, and yes, that's right. You read the title, and you know what the first Pixar short film it is that I'm reviewing. Yeah, I gotta say, this was a pretty interesting, creative, and excellent Pixar short film from the genius mind of the late legendary animator Bud Luckey. Yes, that's right, from 2003, I'm reviewing Bud Luckey's very own piece of animation material, and which being a Pixar short film, you name it. This says it all about Bud Luckey. It's all Bud Luckey, best said by Ed Catmull and all of those at Pixar. This speaks Bud Luckey from beginning to end, just you name it. That's right. Boundin. Yes, Boundin. Yeah, I've of course seen this short film before. I think one of the very first times I watched and had seen Boundin was when I had a DVD copy of the collection of Pixar short films Volume 1. So yeah, not to mention that Boundin, it was screened alongside with The Incredibles, but Boundin came out a year early before The Incredibles, but it wasn't until when The Incredibles happened, yeah, that's when Boundin was seen, you know, big time and such, I guess you could say, yeah. And yeah, and having re-watched this, you know, it's still entertaining, funny, and it delivers a pretty good message, and with one of the main characters helping out this sheep who loves to dance, but, you know, things go downhill for him when he becomes depressed and shy after his wool is, you know, cut and such, you know what I'm saying? Just, yeah. And of course, with the title of the short film, Boundin', well, because this helps our main, one of our main characters, the sheep. Yeah, so, but yeah, overall, Boundin', it's a really good Pixar short film. Again, this says it all about Bud Luckey, who Bud Luckey is, this being all Bud Luckey, and, you know, Bud Luckey who had done animation for 30 years, you know, especially when he most notably did some hand-drawn animation in the early days of Sesame Street. One of his most notable pieces of animation from Sesame Street is the Ladybug's Picnic. But also, he did say the singing farmer, you know, on a violin, and he also did the Alligator King, yeah. But most notably, it's the Ladybug's Picnic that he's probably best known for, having done animation for the early days of Sesame Street. You know, not to mention that in the little, like, 3-minute documentary, and, you know, on the making of Boundin' and on Bud Luckey, who is Bud Luckey, that being one of the bonus features on Disc 2 of The Incredibles, but you can find it on YouTube. You know, Bud Luckey comments that, you know, teaching kids 30 years ago on, you know, how learning their numbers and the alphabet and such, and 30 years later, he's being taught how to do animation on a computer, you know, and how he puts at it, if you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and besides, you know, he started from hand-drawn animation and then made his way to computer animation. And as Pete Docter pointed out about Bud Luckey, you know, I'll do animation on computers and such, and yeah. And, well, when he would make his way to Pixar, being the, sorry, not the fourth, the fifth animator hired at Pixar, yeah. And one of his most, like, some of his most notable works in some of the Pixar films, well, obviously, on the side of voice acting, probably best known for being the original voice of Agent Rick Dicker in The Incredibles. He also voiced Chuckles, the clown, in Toy Story 3. But on the side of doing animation, stuff like that, well, he was responsible for having Woody become who he is, a cowboy doll. And, not to mention, the way he does Western stuff, is very creative. Not to mention, in A Bug's Life, the hideout of the grasshoppers, they hide out in a sombrero. That's all Bud Lucky. That was his idea. Yeah. And also, one more thing to mention before I continue on and, getting into Boundin itself. On Disc 2 of Monsters Incorporated, he did this, little short film or something on paper, the Mans and the Mons, the early days, the beginnings of the monsters, if you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, that being Bud Lucky as well, so, and not to mention he narrates that. But anyways, so Boundin, again, it says it all about Bud Lucky. This is his very own piece of animation material, and this being a Pixar short film, and also, not to mention, Boundin is the first ever Pixar short film to have dialogue. Apart from, say, some of the Pixar short films that, are, say, from Monsters, Inc., Toy Story, I'm talking about the short films that are their own short films, okay? If you get what I'm saying. But, years later after Boundin, we would get, say, Day and Night, and there would be some dialogue from a radio show, if you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, I think you get the point. But anyways, so again, Boundin, it's definitely a really good Pixar short film from Bud Lucky himself. It says it all on Bud Lucky. Alright, so, as always, for me, read the description / the story. A sheep dances proudly in his southwestern landscape until, one day, his wool is sheared. Yeah, sheared. That's what I meant to say earlier. And he is left naked. He's depressed and shy, until a cheerful jackalope comes along and shows him how to leap proudly and not be ashamed. Yes. So, yeah, now getting into Boundin itself. Well, taking place in the southern western landscape, and Bud Lucky, who not only wrote, directed this, but he also is the voice of the narrator and does 2 other voices. Not to mention, Boundin was co-directed by Roger Gould. They co-directed this, yeah. And not to mention, Roger Gould, yeah, being a big-time member of Pixar, he also, yeah, he and Pete Docter, they co-directed the Monsters, Inc. short film Mike's New Car. So, yeah, Roger Gould also co-directing another Pixar short film. But anyways, well, our narrator, again, being voiced by Bud Lucky, and Bud Lucky, best said by him, wanting to have Boundin, be like a Western waltz, and the narrator like someone, like an old cowboy or your uncle telling this story. Yeah. And, well, our main character, who's the lamb, who has nice, bright wool, and he would always dance and, entertaining his neighbors, and they would join in the fun. We have prairie dogs, we have a snake, we have an owl who lives underground, and 2 dancing fish who smile. And yeah, life going pretty well for the lamb until a man shows up and shreds his nice, fluffy, bright wool. And fun fact, the shots where we see the man's hand, it's actually the same hand of the dentist from Finding Nemo. It's true. Not to mention the owl who pops up from the hole. It's actually, the model of the owl is taken from the prairie dogs, but made up to be an owl. So, I guess the body shape or something? That's my guess, but yeah. And yeah, the poor lamb getting his wool sheared. And when he's finished, it's stormy and rainy, and the poor lamb just feeling depressed that all of his beautiful bright wool is gone, and now his friends, most notably the prairie dogs, are making fun of him for how he looks. And then the storm ends when out comes the American jackalope, the great American jackalope, mythical creature and such, and hopping his way and, well, seeing what's up with the lamb. And the lamb explaining to the jackalope, and which, by the way, both the lamb and the jackalope being voiced by Bud Lucky. So yeah, Bud Lucky doing all the voice work. Just 3 voices. There are only 3 voices in Boundin: the narrator, the lamb, and the jackalope. And I like how, from the narrator to the jackalope, Bud Lucky's just using his regular voice, but he's kind of giving a voice to the lamb, just like this, and because he's depressed, I used to be something, and yeah. So the lamb giving all the details to the jackalope on, he used to be happy, cheerful, dancing around with his beautiful wool, but then when, they show up and, shear his wool and such, yeah. Poor lamb. And, well, of course, the lamb pointing out to the jackalope that his friend's making fun of him, laughing at him for, looking ridiculous, funny, and pink. But the jackalope helps out the poor lamb and gives him courage and for him to not feel down and to be happy and such, and finding his Boundin. Dancing and such, and, what's called a bound and rebound, and blah, 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 yeah. And the lamb finds it. And even when the jackalope, gives him, the instructions on how to find his bound, like get a leg up and slop it down, and thus he starts to, bounce, and thus he's found his Boundin. It's pretty funny, like, the jackalope making a comment on when the lamb said that, he looks funny, ridiculous, and pink, and, pink? What's wrong with pink? And what the jackalope says, like, it's pretty funny. And it's true because, sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down, but when finding your Boundin, yeah. So again, like, the message that's delivered and from the jackalope, it's really well put and well done, yeah. And yeah, thus the lamb has found his Boundin, and everything's all better now. And even all of the lamb's neighbors joining in, and the camera shot of him bounding in circles, and when it's winter time, and the poor snake, he's covered in snow, but yeah, when it comes to winter, he's got his wool back. And so, from there on, every year up to the month of May, his wool being sheared, and, he doesn't care anymore. He learned to live with it, and always finding his Boundin. Yeah. And one last, the last shots where everyone's bounding, they're jumping and such. And when the jackalope departs, and apparently the prairie dogs tag along. I mean, why? Because, they're not related to the jackalope or something. I don't know. Even like the jackalope gave them a disgusting look, just like, because, stop, because the prairie dog's laughing at the lamb, and yeah, the jackalope setting the prairie dogs straight, just giving them that look, just, yeah, I'd want, stop it right now. So anyways, yeah, so Boundin itself, yeah, it's a really good Pixar short film. It says it all about Bud Lucky. It's all Bud Lucky, pure Bud Lucky, you name it. Everything from beginning to end, the story to this Pixar short film, the characters, really good music, that was, what's the word, I can't think of it, arranged, thank you, to myself, arranged by one of the members of Riders in the Sky, Joey Miscall, Cullen, who plays accordion. The Riders in the Sky, they'd probably be best known, and they've worked with Pixar before, most notably singing Woody's Roundup. Yeah, so one of the members of Riders in the Sky arranged a really good music and score for Boundin. Yeah. So again, Joey, being one of the members of the Riders in the Sky, and he came in very later, joining Riders in the Sky. It started off with 3, then a 4th member stepped in, and again, Joey, he plays accordion. So it's nice that, you know, he was involved in Boundin and arranging this really good, you know, Southwestern music and such. Yeah. And, you know, whenever thinking of Boundin, you just can't help but, you know, think and listen to that music in your head, right? Just like I'm doing right now. Yeah. Also, another thing to mention about Boundin, because I feel like mentioning this as well, where if you had the Cars DVD, and at the menu, if you wait a little long, well, the Dinoco symbol would show up, and that being an Easter egg, you click on it, and, well, apparently, McQueen and Mater, they're watching a movie, which being Boundin, and they're those characters. McQueen is the lamb, and Mater's the jackalope. And yeah, it's the dialogue/audio from Boundin that's in that. If you know what it is and what I'm talking about, and, well, I mean, heck, nowadays you can find it on YouTube, so yeah. But yeah, just overall, Boundin itself, it's a Pixar short film masterpiece, without a doubt, and you know, a masterpiece from the late legendary Bud Luckey, without a doubt. And I'm giving Boundin, well, if it's not obvious, 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for Boundin. And what about you guys? What did you think of Boundin itself? Is it one of your top favorite Pixar short films? For me, it would be up there, yeah. And were you familiar with Bud Luckey, you know, even before you saw Boundin? Like, was this, and most notably The Incredibles, one of your first, you know, introductions to Bud Luckey? It was to me, for sure, so, yeah. And have you seen any other works of Bud Luckey's, and with what I've mentioned when, you know, he was a part of Sesame Street and his other works in animation, of course, most notably, you know, a lot more of Pixar, just, yeah. And of course, when hearing his voice, when he did some voice acting, you know, again, from Rick Dicker, Chuckles the Clown, and not to mention, he even voiced Eeyore. You know, so, yeah. But, yeah, just overall, what do you think of Boundin itself? And with what I've had to say, my review, and yeah, what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Disney and Pixar's / Bud Luckey's Boundin. More review videos are on the way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward. And I'll see you guys in the next video / review. And, well, stay tuned, because there's one more Pixar short film left for me to review, a part of Pixar Short Film Weekend. And to best describe it, well, let's just say it's about 2 guys who are 2 competitive one-men band. Yeah, I think you know exactly what it is. Yeah. Again, stay tuned for that. Take care, and rest in peace to the one and only Bud Luckey. Peace out.